here on the River Islands guest line. Isn't it time for you to discover the islands? That's River Islands in Lathrop. And we got George Kontos on the line now. George, how you doing, man? You have a good 4th of July?
Good morning, fellas. How we doing? Yeah, 4th of July was great. Got to watch the Giants win from the studio.
Awesome. That's tremendous.
Watch that.
It was toasty out here in the Bay. I know you're a Chicago guy. I know it gets toasty out there. Little humid and hot, but it was enjoyable to watch the Giants do their thing. 7-3 in their last 10, George. This team's rolling right now, man.
Team's doing good. I mean, you obviously are piggybacking Elliot Ramos and what he's been doing. I mean, Matt Chapman has been hitting the ball hard. He finally has gotten something to show for it with his homer last night and that little squib double that he hit that we got a good laugh about when we spoke to him in the post-game interview. But they're playing great. I mean, you had two marquee matchups. Logan Webb had a little bit of a slow start, but ended up going 7 in the fashion that he typically does. And I think these last two series against the Dodgers and the Braves have been huge, huge wins just for the momentum of this team.
Yeah, you mentioned Logan Webb there, George, and myself, I've been banging on the table for the last couple months saying, get this man to Arlington for the All-Star game. We were talking about with Dave Fleming a bit yesterday. He said it's stupid that it hasn't happened just yet. With what he did yesterday, 7 more innings, 6 more strikeouts, allows those 2 runs, but doesn't let that get to him later on in the game. I feel like with the final rosters being announced this Sunday, I feel like Logan Webb, he really put the stamp on that All-Star case for him this year.
Well, I would hope so. I mean, he retook the MLB innings pitched lead last night with his 7 strong, and I mean, the guy's done nothing but just be fantastic this year. I mean, and last year, his track record has been great. He gets a little bit, I feel like, in that West Coast bias where he gets a little bit overlooked with some of the East Coast teams and some of the pitchers that are getting watched in prime time day in and day out. But Logan Webb, that's one of the things I know he wants it, and he's just overall a bulldog on the mound. And it'd be a shame for him to get snubbed with the body of work that he's put in the first half so far.
Yeah, and to speak about great bodies of work here, Elliot Ramos over the last month plus, ever since he got called up, already ranking amongst the best outfielders in the National League. Do you think we might be seeing him called on Sunday and sent to Arlington for the All-Star game?
I would hope so. I think the only dig against him would be just his body of work, the fact that he hasn't been up in the big leagues for the entire first half. But I think that when you look at what he's done in his last 29 games, that should trump the fact that he's been here for the whole first half. I mean, he's got 16 extra base hits, 10 homers in his last 29 games, which I think is 3rd in that span in all of baseball, just behind guys like Aaron Judge. So I think he's absolutely deserving of being an all-star. And you know what? He's just a guy that this team really needs right now, and it's great to see how his development has finally gotten to a place where he looks like he's consistent and he belongs here, and he's not going anywhere.
George Kontos joining us here on the River Islands guest line, former World Series champion with the San Francisco Giants and pre- and post-game analyst at NBC Sports Bay Area. George, how important is this start coming up for Blake Snell, coming off that rehab? I mean, we want to say 3rd time's the charm, right? Just every time it feels like, oh man, we're getting him back. Something flares up. He doesn't feel right. And hopefully he's at a place mentally and physically where he's finally feeling all right. How big is this stretch coming up for the Giants? Just ending this stretch on such a positive note. So I guess a double-parter here. Blake Snell and the team overall heading into this weekend on this road trip to Cleveland and then back home for Toronto and Minnesota before the All-Star break.
Well, I think physically Blake Snell's feeling great. I'm sure you guys have seen his most recent rehab start, 5 innings, no hits, 1 walk, 9 punchies on 67 pitches down in Sacramento. So as far as physically, I think the stuff is probably no problem there. But yeah, look, he's had a first half that I think he's the most frustrated about. Us as fans and people who talk about the game and, radio and all that, everyone has their opinions about it, but Blake Snell is the one that I'm sure is the most frustrated because this was not his intent. And when you get kind of that late spring training signing that he did, he wasn't able to go through his normal routine, and there are several factors that kind of go into a guy just feeling comfortable. He's around new guys, he's wearing new threads, he's in a new city, he's getting a late start, so he might feel a little bit more pressure to get moving and get going to be major league ready a little bit sooner. So all of these things, I think, have played a role in how his first half has gone. But, the Giants' rotation is only been Logan Webb and Jordan Hicks consistently for this first half. And when you're throwing with only 2 guys, it makes it very difficult. And they've been able to tread water for this long, only being 3 games back of that last wild card spot. So I think that Blake Snell getting back and being consistent and somewhat like the Blake Snell of last year would be fantastic. But then you got guys like Alex Cobb and Robbie Ray and Keaton Wynn, all these guys who are on the way back, and we hopefully will see here soon. But the Giants' keys to their success since I've been a part of the organization since 2012 has always been pitching, both starting and bullpen, and solid defense with some timely hitting mixed in. So if we can get back to that, I think there's a lot of good things that could happen in the second half of this season. Absolutely,
especially if the lineup can keep rolling too. Obviously, you mentioned Chapman, Slayer, they're hitting very well right now. But you mentioned Jordan Hicks. He is well past his career high in innings. He's been pretty consistent in giving the Giants about 5 innings per start, which is great. I think that before the year, that was if you said he's going to consistently be doing that, you would take that. But he's pretty much right now on pace for about 160, 165 innings, which going from 70-something innings all the way up to 160-something innings, that's a major jump for a pitcher, especially a guy who throws as hard as he does. So my guess is at some point the Giants are going to try and scale back his workload. So I'm curious, what do you expect this next kind of month or so to look like for Jordan Hicks, especially since we got, Kyle Harrison, he's making his return start tomorrow, Blake Snell on Sunday, and then Cobb and Ray also waiting in the wings.
Well, he's thrown 78 in the third innings, I believe, is his max at the major league level. But when he was in the minors in low A and high A, between those 2 levels, he did throw 101 quite a few years ago. So he's definitely going to surpass all of this workload by a ton. And what a lot of people don't understand is it's just such a big increase in volume that you don't want him to do anything that would jeopardize himself getting hurt. And he's a strong guy. He obviously is his lower body's strong. He's got a fantastic arm. He's been able to do it at a very high level so far this season. But I do think at some point you're going to start looking at that innings count and you're going to start scratching your head a little bit on how can we, A, protect the player, because that's most important, but still maybe get some, help out of him. And I think that's something that they're going to have to sit down and talk about. And I'm sure he will probably be involved in that conversation, but I don't see them letting him get to 160 or 170 innings. I don't know that is even something that's in the picture. But if you could put him in the bullpen and kind of maybe get a few innings here and there out of him with some nice rest in between, that's definitely something to talk about. But what the Giants do have, hopefully, is the reinforcements coming. So if you do have to address the issue of who's going to be in your starting rotation, you still have those guys coming back. And, Kyle Harrison is also in that kind of same boat. He's never thrown 150 or 160 innings in his professional career. So I think those 2 guys are going to be some question marks, and there are going to have to be some decisions to be made on what kind of workload that they're comfortable giving them throughout the course of the season. But I think that this all kind of will help solidify itself if you get some of those guys back healthy. Logan Webb, you're just going to let him go. Robbie Ray, he can come back. You're going to get Alex Cobb back. You can get Keaton Wynn back and put him in the rotation. Then you got a guy like Hayden Birdsong who's come up, and I think he's done a fantastic job so far. So if you can just keep everybody healthy, you eventually will run into a point where you will be able to fill those 5 spots in the rotation if you have to pull a guy or 2 out because of a workload issue.
That's George Kontos joining us here on the River Islands guest line. And George, you mentioned the guy right there, and I want to get into him. Hayden Birdsong, 6th-round pick back in 2022 by the Giants. The pride of Illinois, like yourself. What can you tell us about Hayden Birdsong? 2 starts in the bigs. His last one gets the win, 5 innings, 4 hits, 2 earned runs, allowed 5 strikeouts. What's the makeup of this kid, and is he for real?
Well, first of all, we are both fellow Illinoisans, but where he's from and where I'm from are very, very different types of places.
Really?
But he's come in and he's done such a great job. When you have these younger kids who are coming up, you don't know how they're going to respond to failure, right? And adversity when it happens, and it inevitably does at the major league level. But he had a big moment for me in his start against Atlanta when he gave up those back-to-back homers and then Doobie hit one off the top of the wall. That was a moment where he had to bear down, and he got out of it, and he did a great job. And it was one of those maturation moments, I thought, where he was able to just show what kind of mental fortitude that he had. So he did a great job for me. I think he's a guy who can be a legitimate force at this level moving forward. And look, he's going to go through his ebbs and flows. He's still a young kid, but he did show that he had some spots of adversity in his first couple starts, and he did get through them, where a guy who, at his age, would be expected sometimes to just break a little bit and falter, but he didn't do that. So he showed a lot of poise in his first two starts at the major league level. One
more, George, before we get you out of here. Giants are in Cleveland this weekend. Cleveland's not a team we see a lot very often. When you look at this Guardians team, is just what stands out to you when you kind of look at this Cleveland team the Giants could be seeing this weekend?
Well, they're good. They can pitch. They can hit. They have a guy in Stephen Vogt in their manager as his first year there who's done a fantastic job, and they seem to have really, really good culture over there. I mean, these guys are doing a great job. They're leading the AL Central right now. They have the 54, 55 wins, I think. So the Giants are going to go in there, and they're again going to have their hands full. Their lineup, top to bottom, is good with Naylor and Kwan and Ramirez at third base. You got some guys who have some thump, and they can run, they can throw, they can play defense. They're just a very good team all the way around the baseball. So I would expect that the Giants are going to have to really bring in their A game and continue playing the type of baseball that they have been against the Dodgers and Atlanta.
George, we appreciate the time, man. Enjoy your weekend, all right?
Thanks for having me, guys.